Good evening, parents and boys of the class of 2024. We gather here not only to celebrate the beginning of Year 12, but also to reflect upon a remarkable journey that has led us to this very point. From the first day of kindergarten in 2012 to the commencement of Year 12, our boys have grown, achieved and persevered in ways that have filled us with immense pride and hope for the future. Throughout these years, there have been numerous highlights that have defined the character and achievements of this exceptional class. The experiences of cadet camps in the cold and wet at Lithgow, the glamour and glitz of the Year 10 and Year 11 formals, successful sporting and cultural tours, and the countless academic and sporting triumphs have left an indelible mark on their lives. However, it hasn't been all smooth sailing. The COVID-19 pandemic presented unforeseen challenges, pushing us to adapt and persevere. Homeschooling became the new normal, a situation that required resilience and determination from both staff, students, and their parents. Our boys face this challenge head-on, emerging stronger and more adaptable than ever before. But what truly defines this class is not just their individual achievements, but their collective spirit and camaraderie. They have supported one another, learned from one another, and grown together. Over the past 5.5 years, they've created lasting memories that will carry with them for the rest of their lives. As they embark on this next journey during their final year of school, they carry with them the values and lessons they have learnt during their time at Knox. They've learnt the importance of hard work, perseverance, teamwork, and compassion. These values will guide them as they navigate the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. During our Year 12 induction day yesterday, we watched an Admiral William H. McRaven's famous speech, having watched it already in Year 7. The message of the address was simple, yet a profound one. The importance of making your bed each day. Admiral McRaven's message is not merely about the tidiness, but it's about discipline, attention to detail, and small, consistent actions that can set the tone for your entire day as well as your life. Much like making your bed, tackling challenges, both big and small, with dedication and care, will prepare you for the journey ahead. So as you embark on this chapter of your lives, remember this lesson. Even the smallest act of responsibility can become the foundation for success and resilience. Keep making your beds, metaphorically and literally, and you'll find yourselves well equipped for any obstacle that comes your way over the next 12 months. The next 12 months will undoubtedly be filled with mixed emotions. We are excited to see the bright futures that they will create. However, we are confident that the boys are well prepared for whatever the future holds, armed with the knowledge, skills, and friendships forged during their time here. So let's delve into some of the things that we can expect over the next 12 months, the HSC year at Knox. Together, the team, and you can see some of them here, Mrs. McMurrough, the Director of Student Development, Mr. Gordon, myself, and joining us in week 4 of this term will be Miss Haselden, as Mr. Gordon has been promoted to the position of Team Leader for Year 7 2024, and we congratulate him on his appointment, as well as our wellbeing team led by psychologist Miss Melinda Price. So what can we expect from the school? Our role as a school is to support the boys, be it through academic support, emotional support, peer support. Looking at emotional support, this will be done through the mentor program as well as the wellbeing team at Knox. Peer support. We encourage the boys to work collaboratively. Friendships will play an incredible and significant role during the HSC year. Every evening in the WSA, you will see boys form study groups and work through challenging coursework together. It's now important that they move away from the idea of competition and embrace the idea of collaboration. This was reinforced by our headmaster, Mr. James, yesterday in his opening address to Year 12. We encourage students to move away from being that student that walks around saying, "What did you get? What did you get?" and asking that question. Because whilst it might make you feel good at the time, it doesn't necessarily make everyone feel good. And always remember that tables can quickly turn. In terms of support, the headmaster also stressed the idea of establishing strong rapport with your individual subject teachers. A strong relationship between your teachers and students can be pivotal during the HSC year. Remember that your teachers have been through the HSC year journey year in, year out, and have plenty of experience in getting the best out of their students. When we look at guidance, remember, we are here as a guide on the side in this journey. We give you academic guidance, and this will be through your KAI mentor, but also Mrs. Goddard and team leaders who are there to answer your questions and help where they can. Career guidance is also on offer, and all you have to do is touch base with Mrs. Gomez, organise a time and sit down and discuss your concerns or questions. And personal guidance. Your team leaders, together with academy staff, are there to give you individualised guidance and support. Together, we will be able to address your unique needs and challenges that may arise, ensuring that you receive the support that you require. We also look to empower you. On Tuesday evening, we inducted our prefects, but they are not the only leaders of our year group. Knox emphasises leadership development and considers all Year 12 boys to be leaders at the school. And believe it or not, the HSC year can provide opportunities for students to take on leadership roles within the community. You can lead a study group. You can lead a presentation of information to your peers. The possibilities are endless. We also encourage you to take responsibility for your own learning and empower you to set goals, manage your time effectively, and make independent decisions about your education. And to the parents, encourage your son to take ownership for his own learning by fostering a sense of agency and helping them recognise their potential. By doing this, it may lead to high levels of motivation and self-confidence. Remember the saying that we used at the beginning, take on the role of the guide at the side. When we look at purpose, it's about goal setting. It's about connecting to lifelong learning and community engagement. The HSC year is now time to set goals. The mentor program at Knox facilitates this by helping students define their aspirations and develop a clear sense of purpose. We also encourage you to connect to life. Your teachers can demonstrate how the knowledge and skills acquired during the HSC year are relevant to real-life situations and future career paths, reinforcing this sense of purpose. And yesterday we spoke about community involvement. Involvement in the community through service or projects can have a positive impact on your HSC year. Give back to the school. Get involved. Attend the CAS swimming. If you're a member of our First 15 rugby, give back to the other boys and turn up and watch the musical recitals, as those boys will return the favour during the winter season. And the last one, belonging. We have a strong culture at Knox Grammar School, and that culture is crucial to success in the HSC year. The boys must always remember that they are part of a supportive and inclusive environment. Their peers, teachers and family will lift them when times are tough. When you look back at your school years, Year 12 will be the one that sits in your memory first and foremost. But also, remember we have a large network of old boy tutors who are there to guide you in the afternoons, not just academically, but to mentor you with decisions, talk through scenarios, talk through scholarship applications, talk through early entry applications, which will also foster that sense of belonging to this community. So as we look ahead, the mentor program will be based around the idea of total fitness. We've spoken about total fitness before, and the 4 parts being academic, spiritual, social, and physical. And we'll speak more about these in the next slide. Social fitness can be defined as nurturing each student's ability to develop a strong relationship and develop attitudes to enhance their emotional well-being. We've talked about how this can work by that sense of belonging, joining activities, and not just focusing solely on study. Academic fitness, as you can see there, spiritual fitness, and then physical fitness. There are many opportunities to improve your own physical fitness and achieve that work-life balance at this school. So our goal is balance, well-being and self-care, and Ms. Price will speak more to well-being in her section coming up. But our goal is to help the boys improve their capacity to manage stress. And we did this yesterday through a yoga session and learning how to recenter your core when times are tough. Increase resilience, reduce symptoms of anxiety and school-related stress, which Ms. Price will speak of, and hopefully the goal is that it'll improve their cognitive function and academic performance. So as you can pick up, well-being is the key to academic success. It is central. As we said, we've given the boys practical strategies, and our mentor program will continue to develop upon these over the next few weeks and terms. The old adage of a healthy mind and healthy body is absolutely central to this. The boys have been told one of the key things that they should look for is to communicate. Staff can only help if we know the boys need help. They should not be afraid to approach us at any time. Academy staff, KAI mentor, head of academy, wellbeing team, team leader, we are all here to help. And this shared vision of togetherness is where we are heading for the 2024. We spoke about the mentor program, and Mrs. McMurrough will speak more about this as well. But this is the term 4 focus: to study without stress. Okay, so the modules that we will cover include an introduction into what stress is, an outline of the way our thoughts influence our feelings and behaviours, how potentially unhelpful thoughts can be challenged, an exploration of how unhelpful behaviour, such as perfectionism, procrastination and work avoidance, caused by these thoughts can be changed. And it is our hope that the students will be provided with some basic tools in the area of cognitive behaviour therapy that they can use to help manage their daily stress as they study. So as parents, and I'm in the unique position too, as a parent of this year group, is about balance. It's about healthy routines. It's about ensuring that the boys are not staying up too late to study. During the induction day, we heard from an old boy, Freddie Harris, who talked about quality versus quantity. It's better to do 45 minutes of effective, targeted study than to sit there for 3 hours late into the evening. The importance of exercise and socialising cannot be underestimated either. It is important that our boys still maintain a normal life during the next 12 months. Just for the parents as well, as it is important for the boys, we are here to support you on this journey. Always feel free to be able to reach out to team leaders, to your son's mentor, or to the academy staff if you have any questions or queries. Encourage your son to get involved. It's his last year at Knox, and we talked about it during the induction service as well. Do not look back and think, I coulda, I woulda, or I should have done this. Okay? It's very important that they take every opportunity that is on offer for them today. And it's about perspective. It's only, yes, the HSC is important, but it is not the be-all and end-all. Encourage your boy to do their best, to stand up, to try new things, to experiment, and if it doesn't work, to reevaluate and look at a different way of doing it. So I'm going to hand over now to Mrs. Price, who is going to take you through the wellbeing component of our presentation this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Manuel. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm going to keep my section very brief because I know there's a lot of content to get through tonight. So just, I guess the two main reasons for me being here are firstly to remind you of our service. We have an excellent team of psychologists here at Knox. We are incredibly fortunate to be so well resourced. I think we are probably the best resourced school in the state when it comes to psychology services. So remember that we are here and around to support you and the boys. And the second reason for me speaking is just to share a few of my tips based on my experience over the last few years working in the Senior Academy. So, a few tips for parents of Year 12 students. Now, I realise some of you may have already been through this journey, and obviously every boy is different, and the experiences do vary greatly depending on the student. But these are some of the common things that we found are useful to kind of speak about. And the first one, obviously, is to stay connected with your son. A strong relationship is critical, and that's not just obviously for the HSC year, but always between parents and sons. And I can't emphasise that enough. Even if you're going through a phase where your son isn't terribly interested in having a lot of contact, just finding a way to be present or available, or just have some little thing you can do where you connect is really important. Second thing is obviously this year is about transitioning onto the big world, and we want the boys to step up and own this journey. So parents' role is very much on the sidelines, like we've said before. This year is that chance to kind of fine-tune a lot of life skills and, independent decision-making and that sort of thing is super important. Perspective and balance is very important. Mr. Manuel mentioned already, and you'll hear we all constantly talk about keeping perspectives through this year. And finally, staying calm for all of us is always a good idea. Now, a quick note on the power of teamwork. You heard Mr. Manuel already talking about this, but the team is so important through the HSC year, especially the parent-son team, in terms of really building that independence, independent problem solving, sending emails for themselves, taking the lead on managing work, managing study, and obviously that works best if parents can offer yourself as a resource, be guided by your son. Do they need help with management of time or planning? Do they need help, being directed away from distractions? Especially the phone, I've mentioned here. I think parents can play a great role in minding the phone for boys so that they can have some time away, and definitely, maintaining that rule to keep phone and tech out of the bedroom at night. That would be a very strong recommendation. I've just put a note in here for the boys. Step up so that your parents don't have to nag you. If you can get in there first and show them what you're doing, parents don't have to keep asking, what are you doing? What are you studying? Finally, just another note on teamwork is just to work really closely with the school team. As I said, we're incredibly well resourced here. We're so lucky at Knox, and the best outcomes come from working together. Another note, quickly, this is probably the most important thing when it comes to some of the challenges that we see in our office. A lot of boys struggling with stress, anxiety. My biggest tip there is to really watch out for those negative thoughts. Often, when we are stressed, the brain gets that threat bias where we tend to overestimate how bad things are going to be. We catastrophize, we overestimate the likelihood of bad things happening, and we get similar negative thinking patterns happening when we get perfectionistic and when we procrastinate as well. So I would say, as a parent, it's really helpful if you can watch out for those negative thinking habits and gently challenge them. If you hear your son saying something that is clearly catastrophic or not quite true, if they get a mark that they're not happy with and they say, this is a disaster, I'm not going to get into the course I want, or I'm not going to be able to do the career I want, those are the things you can gently just question and challenge, just kind of say, is that really true? What are the facts here? I've just made a note about reframing setbacks. I'm going to talk about that next. And in terms of challenging unhelpful habits, all that is about is just knowing that one of our common issues that the boys talk about is falling into habits of procrastination. And if you're noticing that happening for them, as Mr. Manuel said, we want to be working efficiently and not wasting time. So parents can play a really good role in pointing out when that's happening and also helping boys to get some help with it. So I just wanted to make a very special quick note about the HSC and how important it is to reframe the HSC for a lot of guys. It is an opportunity. It's an amazing opportunity to just do your absolute best, in an environment where you've got a lot of support. It's not the meaning of life. It does not determine all future success or well-being, and it's certainly not the only pathway to a course or career. And if you meet with Ms. Gomez, she will help you understand that very well. Finally, this has been said before, but keep the balance. We can't say it enough. Don't focus on one area when it comes to total fitness. Keep all areas balanced. For parents, I would say definitely keep your expectations realistic. Be prepared to perhaps be a bit more flexible when things are a little busier. And for yourselves, I always recommend parents seek their own support. We have great resources at school. We're always available in the psych team to talk with you if you need any help or there's something you're concerned about. Please get in touch. But also there are some brilliant online resources, including Reach Out Parents, which is popping up there. That's their homepage. And finally, just a note on when to seek help. I've said anytime because I think it's worth just chatting anytime you're concerned or anytime you have something on your mind. And at the school office, there's nothing that will stop you from being seen. We can see people for any reason. But for parents, these are the kind of warning signs to look out for. And mainly it's about if you see a significant change in mood or behaviour. I've listed some of the things to watch out for there. If those things are going on, that's a sign that it's worth seeking help or at least getting in touch with us and having a chat, and we can guide you in the right direction. This is how you get in touch with us. Feel free to email or contact our reception, and the boys can pop in any time during school hours to make an appointment. Thank you. Feel free to contact, and I'm going to hand over to Mrs. McMurrough now.
Hello everyone, it's so nice to, well not to see you, but it's so nice to do this for you, and I hope you enjoy the presentation. What I want to begin by saying is, your boys are absolutely awesome. We are so looking forward to working with them and supporting them through the Year 12 journey. They've impressed us so much through their Year 11 journey, so it's a great year ahead, lots to look forward to. My name's Mrs. McMurrough, I'm the Director of Student Development, and I also look after student leadership. So, here's the Knox Total Fitness model. As you already know, this is at the heart of everything we do. We don't just want to teach your boys, we want to prepare them for the world ahead so that when they leave Knox, they're equipped and they're the best young men that they can be. So, how do we do that? First of all, this is what we aim to do. We aim to give them the emotional literacy skills, the well-being knowledge, to help them in life. We want to help them work out what's their meaning and their passion and their purpose. We want to give them the skills and knowledge that they're going to need after Knox. We want to equip them with leadership skills and opportunity. We want to expose them to opportunities so that they can recognise the importance of social justice, community and culture. And hopefully, over year 12, they're going to get some great, fantastic memories along the way. So how do we do this? We have a great mentor program in place. And as Mr. Manuel said, the first module is managing stress. We go on to look at relationships and the importance of the relationships in our lives and how that can help us. We look at study skills, we look at life after Knox. It's really important to know that the student leadership program is an opt-in program. So every single boy can get involved, can have leadership opportunities for development, and can make real impact in the school. And this is really important because lots of boys go for early entry, especially with the Leaders and Achievers system at Macquarie University. So I really encourage boys to get involved in the student leadership program. It looks good on a resume, it helps them in life, it gives them something to talk to at interview, and it really develops them as young men. Along year 12, we have lots of experiences and events. So this week we had the year 12 induction, which was brilliant. The boys were so good, they responded so positively. There'll be public speaking courses. We have guys come in from Moneyvest to talk about financial literacy. We celebrate International Women's Day, Are You OK Day, and soon we'll also be offering the opportunity to volunteer at the Dish as well in Hornsby. So lots of experiences. Our year meetings and our academy assemblies are really intentional. We try to respond to the needs of the year group, and what it does is it builds that collective identity. The memories that the boys form are not individual, they're a collective. And when they look back at their experience of Knox, it will often be to do with what we did together as a team. And remember when we did this. And so a lot of those memories come from year meetings and academy assemblies. It's also an opportunity to share best practice. So very often we'll call upon boys who are doing well in a particular aspect of their lives to share how that's done and how that's achieved. That's a celebration, and it also helps their peers. Over the course of the years, we'll have a number of guest speakers too. So, last slide from me, practical matters. In term 2, the boys will start working on their year 12 reference, and that's very much an activity that goes on between students, mentors, and parents. And I really do encourage your active participation in that process. The Year 12 reference is the reference that the boys leave the school with. It's a really, really important document. We want to make it the best reference it can be. And so for that reason, it's a three-way partnership. So please do take that active role when the time comes. And boys, when you're working on that reference, take it seriously and begin in advance. Year 12 is busy, so the more things we can do in advance, the easier it becomes. The other thing I'd like to mention is EAS applications. So this year, it's not applicable to you guys, but just for your reference, this year the deadline's the 23rd of November. When it comes to you guys next year, I don't want us to leave applications to that late point. EAS is for students that are at a disadvantage and boys that can be disadvantaged for a whole number of reasons. If you think that applies to you, I urge you to go onto the Google. I urge you to go onto Google and just type in EAS. The website tells you all about it. It could refer to a boy who suffers from anxiety or ADHD, or it could be that someone's got sick at home or someone's passed. If that applies to you, it's really important we put an application in because then that's taken into account when applying for university. But there's a lot of paperwork involved sometimes. And what I often see is if a boy, let's imagine, he's got ADHD, he wants to apply for this, but but he hasn't been to see his paediatrician and he hasn't got a medical impact statement, it might be of detriment to his application. So please be aware of this as you go into year 12. Look at the website, look at the timeline, look at the documentation that you might need to make that process easy and timely. The last thing you want is last-minute panics during year 12. But that said, if there is a last-minute panic, we are always there to help in any scenario. Please never get in touch. We look forward to supporting you through year 12. Like I say, your boys are awesome, and it's going to be a phenomenal year ahead. Thank you so much. Now to introduce Mr. Nunan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McMurrough, and welcome to parents and carers in the class of 2024. This evening, my focus is going to be very much on looking at the HSC process. With us just 1 year out from sitting the HSC, this information will build upon information that's been provided via the Year 10 subject selection evening along with our meeting earlier in the year. So as I said, my focus is going to be very much on looking at how the HSC process works. It does take some time to get your head around this, so please go back and review this presentation at your leisure, and if you do have any questions around how it works, please feel free to reach out. For the boys, you'll have plenty of opportunities throughout the coming weeks through year meeting for us to discuss these processes further. So let me start by just looking at how we understand, the understanding behind the HSC assessment. And as it says there, please, we're going to focus on what NESA does from an HSC perspective, and not so much around the ATAR, which is managed by UAC. So you can see there that what we're really looking at is the assessment and the assessment rank that the boys will achieve through their 4 internal assessment tasks in each of their subjects throughout Year 12. It will also look at how the performance of the cohort is very, very important in towards how they moderate the HSC internal examination marks. So when we look at that and we look at the combination of those from 50% of the HSC exam mark and 50% of the moderated assessment mark, that then generates an HSC mark. So my focus tonight is very much going to be about how we go about how NESA develops that mark and produces an overall HSC mark for each boy that sits the HSC. So you can see from this, obviously the boys will go through a series of assessment tasks. The school will submit these assessment marks, and please recognise they are different from school to school, and that's why the HSC examination is so important, because that allows for that moderation of the internal assessment marks. And then obviously they will generate an HSC assessment mark. We also have, obviously, the students will complete the exam, which then allows, obviously, the HSC to commence in terms of the marking. The judges at marking are able to align the exam marks to a set of performance descriptors, which then allows them to recognise where the marks will sit, and then allows them to set up the bands that we know of, and I'll talk to that in a moment. So that's what an HSC certificate would look like. So you can see there each of the courses, the examination mark, the assessment mark, and the performance band in each of those subjects. And you can see, as I said before, 50% of that mark comes from the moderated assessment mark and 50% from the examination performance. So a couple of things to note. HSC marks. The HSC exams are marked and raw scores for each student are determined. For each exam, there's a team of judges who undertake a standard setting operation. They determine the raw mark band cutoffs. Now, it's clear that when you get your results back, you don't actually see your raw marks, because obviously those raw marks are aligned and then are moderated. So you actually will get a moderated assessment mark and a moderated HSC exam mark. So just to give you a bit of an idea there, when we start to think about, when boys start to talk about, can I possibly get a band 6 or a band 5? It just takes you through what that looks like. So to get a band 6, you've got to be 90 or more. Now that doesn't mean that you're scoring a raw mark of 90 in the HSC. It will come down to the performance on the day, and not only the performance of the individual, but the cohort as a whole. And the judges will then work out where do the minimum raw marks and where do they align with each of the descriptors. And from there, they're able to then work out the mark for each student and where they fit into each of the band descriptors, and of course band 6, 5, 4, 3 and so So, for example, this is not real data, but you can see there the judges might decide that the band cutoff for a Band 6 was a raw mark of 85, and please recognise that does change from year to year, and a Band 5 was 75. So just note that you don't have to score more than 90 raw to actually get yourself into a Band 6, or more than 80 to get yourself into a Band 5. There's just some other examples there where they go about looking at the HSC raw mark. From the HSC raw mark, they then look at those descriptors, they work out the band cutoffs, and then obviously the moderation occurs. So they actually see, if you look from that left column, the HSC raw mark of 83, that HSC mark, or that raw mark, is then adjusted based on the judges and where they're looking at those descriptors. So there, what you finally get is the exam mark, you can see there, and the combination of those leading to the performance band that's on that far right column there, as we run through each of those. So as I said, boys, we'll go through more of this throughout the year, over the coming weeks, and for any parent who is still unsure after this evening and reviewing this presentation, feel free to reach out. Now, this is an important slide, and why it's an important slide, Mr. Manuel mentioned earlier this evening in this presentation around why it's so important that the boys really recognise the importance of collaboration, and this really highlights that. So if we look at the slide from left to right, you can see that we have the school assessment mark. Now that school assessment mark, there's just some students there from A to F. The NESA would call that school-wide currency because it's only really relevant to the school. As I said, each school has different assessments and obviously mark in different ways, so the marks are not relevant. But that's why they call it school-wide currency. And these are all based on the 4 assessment tasks the boys will do commencing this term through to the trial HSC in term 3 next year. You'll also see in that middle column there we have the statewide currency. Now the statewide currency is the boys will sit in the Great Hall and do their HSC as all the students around the state do. And it's that HSC examination that they all sit that allows for the moderation of the internal assessment marks. So you can see, if we move across to the right, the far right there, you can see the moderated assessment mark. So for student A, their school assessment was 90, and that was the raw mark that the school submitted. You can then see that student went in and performed on the day and received a mark of 92. So what they then do is they look at the total pool of marks in the actual exam. So you can see there the total pool of marks was 409, and the mean that you can see there is 68. So what NESA will do through a range of algorithms will actually then ensure that when you move to the school assessment mark, they will adjust those marks so that the total moderated assessment mark will add up to 409 and the mean will be 68, as you can see in that far right column there. So it's really, really important, guys, to recognise that when you're doing your assessment tasks, don't be so concerned with your raw marks, because those raw marks are just a measure of where you're at. It would look very different in the end in terms of when the HSC is sat and those internal assessment marks are moderated. One of the key factors I strongly believe that we have as an advantage here at Knox is the ability for our boys to sit in a venue where they're able to collaborate, share ideas, and really work together towards a common goal, and that is sitting the final HSC exam and ensuring that every single student in each and every subject is able to perform to their personal best. And this really aligns itself with, if every single boy can achieve to their personal best, they can contribute to that pool of marks I was talking about. And the larger the pool of marks that we have, the larger that positive moderation will be in terms of the internal school assessment, which contributes to 50% of the overall HSC mark. So as I said, collaboration is crucial. Together we can lift each other's performance, both in the final examination. Because of this, if we all do work to our personal best, it will then impact on positive moderation in the internal assessment mark. Now it's important that although the school is always ranked on Band 6 numbers, and we often hear boys talking a Band 6, can I perform to a Band 6? Please note, gentlemen, that it is the combined effort of the whole cohort that lifts the total marks, HSC marks. So our Band 6 results are a reflection of the whole cohort. And I think that's a really important point to make. Here's another example, and it is just an example. They're not real marks, but just to once again hopefully highlight what I've been discussing this evening around the importance of working together to ensure that we maximise our total marks, which leads to positive moderation of the school assessment. You can see here I've got a range of people that I've sat the HSC, and you can see that Greg in the school assessment was rank 1 with a school internal assessment mark of 90. He then went on to the HSC and for whatever reason scored a mark of 80 in the HSC examination, whereas Martin, who had an internal assessment of 75 and was ranked 3rd, went into the HSC exam and topped for the school and received the top mark in the HSC examination. So how does that work? What actually happens is that while Greg was ranked 1 in the school assessment, what they do is that they will align the top internal assessment rank with the top HSC exam mark. And what then occurs is, and it's called top bookend and the bottom bookend. What they then do is they say, as I said before, they'll look at the total marks that were attained in the HSC exam, and they will apply them to the school assessment. So they use an algorithm which allows them to go, okay, the top exam mark was 92, and you can see that the lowest exam mark was 50. So they'll then go down to the student that was ranked 6th in the school assessment, and they will apply 50 to that student. So you can see already there's positive moderation for that student. So like I said, if we can get every student working to their personal best and improving on their marks from their trial HSC, we'll see significant gain in the positive moderation of that school assessment. So you can see they apply the marks there, and we can see that all those marks, if you add them up, will align to the total marks achieved in the HSC, and you'll also see the mean is the same at 68. All right. One point that I really wanted to highlight this evening is around the importance of not getting into a mindset around wanting to protect internal assessment ranks. It's something that every school has to deal with, and it's an ongoing issue, but I'm hoping this evening I'm going to be able to break that down a little bit and allow the boys to see that working together throughout these next 4 terms is going to be to the benefit of everyone, from the top ranked student to the student lower down in the rank. What do I mean by that? Well, a couple of things to think about. The top ranked students should be working together. They should not be thinking about protecting their rank. Why? Because as I said before, not only if they work together will they assist one another, get ideas from one another, and just have those people to bounce ideas and study together with, they'll be able to lift their own performance and that of their peers. So collaboration across the entire cohort is an important thing that the boys should be striving to do. The other point that I want to make is by all the students working together, and particularly the boys at the top of the rank, that we'll be able to set that top bookend working together. It's like an insurance policy on the day of the exam. What that means is that obviously if we've got 5, 6 boys all working together at that very top rank and they go into the HSC, we'd like to think on any given day that all 6 of them perform to their very, very best. But obviously different variables occur. What we want to ensure is that at least one of those boys achieves their very best mark and achieves to their personal best. Why? Because you can see in this first example, if one of the students scores a mark of 99, that mark of 99 in the exam will then be aligned to the top bookend rank in the internal assessment. If for whatever reason, none of those students perform to their best, and one of the students, the best mark we have of those students is 93, that 93 will then align with the top bookend and the ranked 1 internal assessment mark, which means already all of those students are now down by 6 marks based on that first example. So I think it's pretty clear that if we all work together and ensure that we're all performing to our best, it's going to benefit the entire cohort. Here's another example. I do apologise for all these examples, but I do think they really reinforce some of the points I'm trying to make this evening. This is one that I've shown boys over the last number of years, and I will be reinforcing with the boys over the coming weeks in year meeting. We have 3 gentlemen here, Jim, Jack and Joe, who you can see here. Jack was the top student in the internal assessment, and you can see that in 3rd place was Jim, and Joe came in rank 9. And you can see that if we then go and look at their performance in the HSC, you can see that Jim basically outperformed Jack. Jim was ranked third, but Jack fell right down. In his terms of his examination performance, he was ranked 11th. So he fell down some way, and obviously we need to think about some scenarios around why that may have occurred. If he was thinking that he was in that top rank, and often we need to dispel the myth that everything is locked in concrete around these internal ranks. As you can see tonight, the 50% of the internal assessment is based on, at the end of the day, the performance of not only the individual but the entire cohort in the HSC. So you can see there that Jim, who was ranked 3, really worked through, scored well in the HSC, had strong adjustment, moderated internal assessment, received his band 6. Jack, who was ranked 1 internally, unfortunately for his external exam performance, he ended up just missing out on that band 6. And then obviously you can see Joe, who was sitting in 9th internally, really worked well, did extremely well in the HSC, and managed to get a 90, which allows him to fall into that band 6 category. Here's some real examples. Here's some real data that comes from a couple of years back, where we're actually looking at 2 subjects. Obviously no particular subjects are mentioned here and no names are mentioned, but you can clearly see that the group on the left, you can see the moderation and the degree of moderation there is insignificant. If you think about the top group, top number of guys there, they've actually had negative moderation between their internal assessment mark and their final moderated assessment. But if you go to the group on the right, that is significant. If you just look at the difference there between the internal assessment and the moderated assessment based on the exam performance, it's significant. So once again, guys, I really think it's a point to note that working together, and obviously we're going to show you how best you do that. It's easy to say go and collaborate, but we will show you over the coming weeks how you go about that. And obviously you've had the opportunity over the last 3 terms watching the class of 2023 in the senior hall, how they've gone about their afternoon and evening studies, how they've gone about preparing for their HSC trial, and how they have gone about getting ready for the exams they've been sitting over the last week or so. So please note that. And one last thing I'll point on this slide is your learner protocols are important. Your learner protocols are a measure of your effort, your engagement, how you're interacting with your teachers and your peers. So please, guys, keep a note on those. You would have received a report, your last report, and please have a look at the learner protocols and the form that goes with that allows you to have a look at where you're at and how you might improve. There's some excellent questions there that will get you thinking around how can I move forward in terms of my interactions in class and my learner protocols. Here's another example in terms of internal assessment marks. Once again, what we're looking at there is, the importance, how significant the internal assessment is if the boys can work throughout the entire course right up to the HSC exam and really get that positive moderation coming from strong performance in that final exam. Okay, so just a couple of points to summarise tonight. We have a bit of a mantra in the WSA around HSC success doesn't come from good luck. What it does come from is good management. And that good management generally will come from how you manage your time. You can see there the boys are already very much aware of the quadrants of quality and will continue to pursue the importance of allowing the boys to recognise when they're in the quadrant of quality, which they are at the moment. In terms of their next assessments are coming up in week 5 and 6, so they've got plenty of time leading into their assessments. But obviously when they're in the quadrant of necessity, which everyone ends up in the quadrant of necessity, using the weeks of Senior Academy, using the staff, as Mr. Manuel mentioned earlier, making sure the old boy coaches, you're accessing those boys. I know the group has used the last 3 terms successfully in terms of accessing the senior hall and tapping into the resources there that includes the old boy coaches. Making sure that homework is a combination of the teacher prescribed work that you do, but also self-initiated work. So looking at your plan, looking at what needs to be done, moving towards the next assessment task. And by doing that, you're not living from assessment to assessment, which is another area we constantly work with the boys on. In terms of holiday periods, as we said to the boys at the end of last term, really that October break was the last true holiday they will have. And the reason behind that is because from this point on, the boys really need to be thinking about getting a balance, not only during the week, but also during these breaks. We call them study breaks. They still get a chance to meet with friends, family, go and do the things they like to do, but really ensuring they don't down tools, ensuring that they continue to do work throughout that time and make sure they hit the ground running for the following term. One of the other things that we'll do, along with Mrs. Goddard, was work with the boys around how they study and what study looks like. There's some examples there of boys over the last number of years and what their rooms at home look like, or their planners that they use to allow them to really manage their time effectively. So in terms of the year ahead, 23 into next year, we have an assessment block which will commence in week 5 and 6. Most of the assessments will be in week 6 and beyond. We have 3 KEI interviews. Now, KEI interviews, Mrs. Goddard's going to speak to at length in this presentation this evening, which is quite timely given that we will be commencing the KEI interviews on Thursday. With the first one, it's occurring in week 2, so we know that is in terms of Thursday, and then that runs into week 3. You'll have half-yearly reports. Now, obviously, we've just had a Year 11 report issued. The half-yearly report will be issued at the end of Term 1 next year, and that will be followed by a student-led conference. And I do really highlight student-led conference because the boys are at the stage of their learning and their schooling career where they should really be at the centre of any discussion around their journey at school. The next KEI, at the start of Term 2, an interim report will be issued at the end of Term 2. Not sure what's happening here. And then the HSC trial exams will usually start in week 5 of Term 3, and this will be followed by a yearly report and the final KEI interview in week 10. And it seems a long way off, but next year the HSC starts on Tuesday, the 15th of October, which will be week 1 of Term 4. Boys, in the next, you should by now have access to the Gantt chart, which allows you to personalise each of your subjects and work out when and where those subjects are and the assessment tasks and when they're due, so you can personalise that. And you should also by now have the assessment booklet. So, in terms of the assessment policy, NESA expects students to undertake all assessments tasks and to be aware of NESA's All My Own Work modules that you've already completed. There are late penalties that apply, and they continue along as we experienced in Year 11. There are explicit rules set by NESA from what constitutes illness and misadventure, and Mrs. Goddard has spoken at length already, guys, around IMAs, so we should be fairly familiar with what the expectations are. IMA applications must be submitted within 48 hours of the assessment date. Medical certificates must be detailed with a condition, so obviously not going into every known little detail, but it has to be more than not just unfit for school. And if a student is absent 2 days before an assessment, including a Friday if the assessment's on a Monday, a medical certificate is required. Okay, one last thing from me before I introduce Mrs. Goddard. And that is, as Mr. Manuel's already mentioned, we have a wonderful resource, a wonderful careers teacher, and actual fact, a director of career education development, Mrs. Gomez, who constantly is working on the school's careers hub, which has an enormous amount of information there that's available. I've also included Mrs. Gomez's email address there. So she's a wonderful resource, a wonderful lady that will be able to help the boys map out not only what next year looks like, but obviously what the year looks like after that in terms of leaving school. I'd now like to introduce Mrs. Beth Goddard, our Stage 6 Director of Studies, who will speak to the Knox Academic Indicator. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nunan. Good evening, class of 2024 and parents. I am the final speaker before Mr. Manuel closes for tonight, so you're almost there. I will speak to about the KAI, which the boys have heard about, and you would have received an email from Greg Nunan just recently outlining what's going to be occurring through this process. So I'd just like to go into a little bit of detail about it, and then I'm just going to highlight at the end a couple of key things about that IMA process that comes across my desk quite regularly, so I'll just remind you of those things as well. So KAI stands for the Knox Academic Indicator. So throughout, from now till the end of the Year 12 journey, every boy has their pastoral mentor already, and they will be assigned an academic mentor. For most of the students, this will be someone that they know well, a teacher, their pastoral mentor, where they can double up. For some students, it will be someone that they don't know, but you will develop a relationship over the next 12 months. There are 3 formal interviews, the first one, of course, being very soon in week 2, Thursday to Tuesday of this week. And that will be looking at through the Year 11 results and what they indicate that your son or you boys, where you're tracking in terms of ATAR currently based on your Year 11 results. That, of course, then will not count towards the start of Year 12, so this whole process will start again as your Year 12 assessments start coming in. The second interview is after term 2, so that will only be partway through Year 12, so for your subjects you won't have all the assessments, so it's a little snapshot in time. And obviously there'll be some variability to that one because there are different tasks throughout the year. So you need to take those numbers with a bit of a grain of salt, but they do just give a bit of a snapshot of where you're travelling at that time. And then the last one is after all the trial exams are done, so all assessments are finished, and we look at where you're tracking. And we know that there still can be a lot of growth after that between the trial and the HSC as well. Besides those 3 formal interviews, boys can see their academic mentor at any time that's convenient with their mentor, and they just need to arrange that. Obviously, if it's your classroom teacher, you can just see them after class, but you can also book in regular times outside of those 3 formal interview times. So it is important to note that the number that you'll see, that I'll show you in a minute, is not a predictor. It's based on historical data from Knox boys. It's just an indicator of where you are sort of tracking, and that's helpful because if you're looking to go to university, you can be looking at courses that are attainable, looking at where you're tracking, and yeah, it's just an indicator. Okay, so you will see a sheet that looks like this. And the KAI itself is that number down the bottom on this slide. It says 73 to 78. So it is a 5-point range derived from the Knox academic mark, which I'll explain. It is calculated basically the same way an ATAR is calculated, which I'll talk about in a moment. And we've talked about the fact that it is an indicator. It is derived from looking at the past 5 years of Knox boys and their rank in each of the subjects. So really, the whole interview process and this whole academic mentor program is more than just looking at this data. It really is engaging with an academic mentor, looking at the whole boy, goals, how their study's going, what they did well in Year 11, what they can change. But this data just provides basically a conversation starter. Just aren't quite clicking over. There we go. So that is the Knox academic mark. So this is a mark out of 50 per unit. So you can see in this sheet that those first 5 subjects are 2-unit subjects. So basically for geography, they will have a mark out of 100. And when you have your top 10 units, which are the units that are counted in the HSC, you end up with a mark out of 500. And some of you parents out there will remember when the HSC was a mark out of 500. It essentially still is, but we use that and we rank that all the marks out of 500, and then we end up with the ATAR. So we use the same process for calculating the KAI. So looking again at the CAM, the Knox academic mark, how that is calculated is looking at the rank in that subject, and on average, a Knox boy with, if we look at geography, a rank of 3 over the past 5 years, on average, would have received a Knox academic mark of 45.6 out of 50. And it's a rolling average, and there is some input from heads of departments, particularly with the smaller cohort subjects. So if your son or boys, if you do a small cohort subject, then these marks are more variable, so you do need to just keep that in mind when you're looking at these numbers. So the KI range is determined using that total out of 500, and of course English must be included in that. So what we get is basically a profile for each individual student based on their rank for each of their subjects. So this student here, with those ranks across those subjects, based on the last 5 years of ranks of Knox boys, would then end up with a KAI of 73 to 78. Basically, another thing to keep in mind is to lift the KAI by 1 point. You're looking at basically raising the CAMS by 6 marks overall. So that's helpful to know. Just those incremental changes can make those changes to the KAI incrementally. So with the interview process, I'll just click all those, you will receive an email with how to book an interview. That's only open for a few days, so make sure you're checking your emails. You book the interview. The interview will be 15 minutes. It will be on Teams. I know the slide says Zoom. We have shifted from Zoom as a school, and we are now doing our interviews on Teams. If the boys are there, if the interview happens to be after school and the boys are around and the staff are still at school, they can sit with their mentor, but for most boys, they'll probably be at home, so obviously you can just join on Teams as well. Boys in preparation, you should be thinking about what worked for you in Year 11, what were the study techniques you used, what do you need to adjust. They're the sorts of conversations that will come into the interview with your academic mentor. They'll also be looking at the well-being, the balance, are you exercising, what's your diet like, how is your sleep, which is one of the areas that a lot of boys struggle with getting enough sleep. So think about that and how you might be able to manage your time so you're working smarter, not harder. You've got more hours, therefore, for rest and to keep a balance throughout the HSC year. Looking at where you're going in each of your subjects will also give you an indication of what subjects you need to work on. So what's working well in my top subjects that I can bring into the subjects that I'm not performing as well in, and maybe it's even shifting them so that they're the first subject you do in the afternoon instead of the last, for example. So conversations really need to reflect the CAMS, and again, I've mentioned some of these things already. It's very important that you boys engage in the formative assessments that your staff will be giving you. That is the way that we're giving formal feedback to lead into your assessment tasks. Some boys are not prepared enough and don't leave enough time to actually engage with the formative work, and that is, I guess, the biggest help towards leading into an assessment is engaging with all the formative work that your teachers are giving you, making sure you get that done. And some of that takes planning, and again, we will work with the year group in terms of planning, backward mapping from assessment blocks so that you do have enough time to create your notes, to learn your notes, to do the formative work, to do practice questions and practice papers so that you are in the best place to sit your assessments. Time management is a huge issue, and procrastination, so again, we will address that, but these are some of the things you can think about with your academic mentor. Moving forward, the KAI is looking back and obviously learning things to then move forward into the HSC. And last little point there, feedback is only useful if you act on it. And I've already spoken to the boys about this and will continue to. Again, it's just all about a conversation with your mentor. And boys, please feel free to approach your mentors and ask for some more time. If they have got time, it is primarily a voluntary position that they've taken up as your mentor. So be aware of that, but they are doing this job because they want to help. So engage in the process as much as you can. Here are just some comments. I'll let you read them in your own time, but for people that have found this quite helpful, and just some feedback from the KAI journey and from having an academic mentor. I'll leave that up just for a moment. You can read that yourselves. And then as I move on to the IMA reminders, Mr. Nunan has already touched on this, but because I deal with the paperwork, and sometimes I have to have some pretty awkward conversations because the paperwork is not done properly, I just want to, again, address these. Please have your assessment policy, know where it is, so that if your child gets sick, young man, gets sick, you're not stressed about knowing what to do. You need to book in a doctor's appointment, preferably on the day. If it's not on the day, the doctor has to be prepared to actually date the day of the assessment. Essentially, we're looking at if you sit the task and you have been unwell, how has your illness affected your performance? The doctor can't just write they had a cold, right? That hasn't affected the performance. We need to know how the performance was affected so that we know whether the IMA is accepted or whether it's not. So a couple of things Mr. Nunan mentioned. If you are absent up to 2 days before, including the Friday before the Monday, you need that medical certificate. It does not need to be an IMA. It is a medical certificate, but it needs to outline why you are not at school. Again, we don't need the detail of the illness in terms of privacy, but we need to know why you're not at school for those day or 2 days before the assessment. If you are absent on the day, then it is an IMA form. Again, I've mentioned it before, it's actually now on just one page and there's a Google link. I should have updated this slide, but you do need an external practitioner to fill that in. And again, we need detail as to why you were affected in your task or how you were affected. That was absence on the day. If you are ill during the task, I've spoken about that. For hand-in tasks, the assessment policy is very clear. The tasks must be handed in on the day because that is a long-term task. And so there's been lead-up time. It's not just a test on the day. It must be handed in anyway. It is rare that an extension is given. That is done through consultation with myself and the head of department. It really is only if a student has not been able to access something like a workshop to finish a major work. In all other cases, if it's an assignment or a hand-in task, it needs to be handed in on the day, regardless whether you are ill and away or not. That's it from me. If you've got any questions about that, please email me to ask, and I'm happy to talk you through that process. I'm going to hand back over to Mr. Manuel to close us off tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Goddard. In closing, I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to Mr. Nunan, Mrs. McMurrough, Ms. Price and Mrs. Goddard, as well as all staff who have shared their insights over the past week with Year 12 as they begin their journey. I'd also like to thank the parents for entrusting Knox with the education and growth of your sons. We've been partners in this incredible journey, and your unwavering support has been instrumental in their success thus far. Finally, I'd like to address the boys of the class of 2024. As we enter Year 12, gents, remember the strength you've discovered within yourselves and the bonds you've formed with your friends. Keep reaching for the stars and never forget that you are capable of achieving greatness. The world awaits your talents, and we have no doubt that you will make us all proud. Thank you.